Still got a few more from the next week.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. Let me recognize the other leaders who are here with me today. Chairman Chris Taliaferro of the Public Safety Committee, his Vice Chair Harry Osterman, Alderman Sawyer, Alderman Ramirez Rosa, Alderwoman Hairston, and Desmond Yancey of the Empowering Communities for Public Safety. Earlier today, a number of measures were passed and introduced during the City Council meeting that will allow our city to take significant steps forward when it comes to rooting equity, inclusion, and transparency at the heart of everything that we do. And let me highlight a few of them. First and foremost, as you can tell from the folks who are gathered here, I'm thrilled to announce and report that the City Council has passed historic legislation that will create a first-of-its-kind independent civilian oversight body for our police department as well as its accountability agencies, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, or COPA, and the Chicago Police Board. This proposal will help propel our city toward becoming a national leader when it comes to constitutional policing and police reform, and importantly, strikes an important balance of a range of interests and issues, feedback from relevant stakeholders, including aldermen, advocates, experts, and our own residents. Beginning January 1 of next year, we will have a 7-member Civilian Oversight Commission that will be completely made up of Chicago residents, helping ensure full representation. To further ensure full representation, within 60 days after commission members take office, a non-citizen advisory council will be created to advise members on the needs and concerns of our citizen population. In addition, this commission will have the power to do a handful of very important tasks, including assessing the performance of and setting goals for the superintendent, chief administrator of COPA, and the police board president, appointing the COPA chief administrator with the advice and consent of City Council, providing CPD, the police board, COPA, and the public safety inspector general with community feedback relevant to their operations received as a result of the commission's public outreach activities, and much more. In sum, the responsibilities given to this commission will provide our residents with an important opportunity to hold our police department accountable and ensure our elected leaders remain accountable for their role in police oversight. As some of you may remember, I promised on the campaign trail to pave a path for civilian oversight of the Chicago Police Department, which is a necessary step towards building trust between officers and the communities they are sworn to serve and protect. You heard me speak earlier today about legitimacy. There can be no legitimacy if the people of the city do not trust the police. And the police will never be effective in fulfilling their sacred oath to protect and serve if they are not trusted by the community and viewed with suspicion. Today, I'm beyond proud to be able to deliver on that campaign promise, not just for me, but because of all the people who are gathered here and all the people that are represented by the folks that are in this room and those who could not be here with us today. This significant step forward will further ensure that residents from all walks of life have an equal chance to oversee CPD by running for a spot on this commission. I mentioned this before in my remarks on the City Council floor. I had the great privilege of leading the Police Accountability Task Force. And one of the key recommendations of that task force was civilian oversight. We were intentional and not dictating in that report the form and substance of that oversight. We thought it was incredibly important for us as a city to engage in further, more robust engagement of residents around this concept of civilian oversight. I didn't think it would take 6 years plus, but here we are. A long journey, a hard journey. At times, didn't think we were going to get there. But we stand here today because I think all of the folks who had an interest in this topic understood the beauty of compromise Compromise, unfortunately, in our democracy has become something of a dirty word. Some people feel that it's weakness, but our democracy depends upon compromise, striking the right balances for those things that are important. Not compromising your values or your ideas, but moving forward and making progress on behalf of our residents. And that's what we were able to accomplish today. And I'm proud to be standing with the folks in this room and the folks who worked so hard on this for so many years. I want to thank the folks at Empowering Communities for Public Safety for their collaboration on this initiative, as well as their recommendations to help make up the backbone of this historic proposal. I also have to give tremendous thanks to Chairman Taliaferro, who I think had guided this work through very difficult times, and at times with great personal sacrifice. So, Chris, I just want to say thank you. I know what this has meant to you. I know why this is so important to you, and I want to thank you for your leadership. I also want to call out and thank Alderman Osterman and Alderman Sawyer. Some of you may recall way back when, in 2018, that these two aldermen were the first sponsors of the original GAPA ordinance. That really, I thought, this is an interesting pairing at the time. But through a lot of trial and effort, both of these aldermen really lived this work, really spent a tremendous amount of time educating themselves, educating their colleagues, and we would not be standing here today without their leadership on this issue. So thank you both. I also want to thank Alderman Leslie Hairston, who's here with us, as well as Carlos Ramirez Rosa, two other people who were very instrumental in raising this issue, raising our consciousness around the necessity of this moment, being very passionate advocates on behalf of communities and residents. So thank you both for your longstanding support of police reform and accountability, and thank you for really being the conscience of the council on this issue. I also want to thank Alderwoman Sophia King, who also has joined in this effort. We also have with us Desmond Yancey, and you'll hear from him in a moment, but I want to thank him for all of his hard work in moving this ship forward through sometimes difficult waters. A second thing that I want to talk about today, which in some ways may pale in comparison, but it's important for those who are affected, and that is the City Council has passed a revised public way use reform substitute ordinance. It shouldn't be this way, that it took so long, and years and years and years, to allow businesses to just get a sign. When I first started hearing about this issue on the campaign trail and hearing small businesses talk about the fact that it would take, in some instances, literally years just to get a sign to say we're open for business, to welcome customers, to advertise for themselves. We now, with the passage of the substitute ordinance today, have cut years, certainly months, off the time it takes a business just to get a sign to open up for business. I appreciate the efforts of many. I want to call out and thank Alderwoman Mitz, and I want to thank Alderman Riley for working with us and working with each other to come to a compromise that cuts red tape for our businesses and delivers the final piece of the unprecedented Shy Biz Strong initiative, which is the most comprehensive legislative package our city has seen in years and will significantly improve how we do business and how we support workers, which is needed now more than ever as we're coming out of the pandemic. This revised piece of the Shy Biz Strong initiative will remove the ordinance requirement for the vast majority of public way use permits, and you heard that today from Alderman Riley. And for those of you who don't know, you want a sign? Prior today, you had to get an ordinance. Draft the ordinance, get it introduced into committee, have a committee meeting, and then hope you get to a favorable vote out of the committee, and then get to the city council floor. Absolutely unnecessary burden on our small businesses at a time when we should be shrinking the red tape, not piling it on. So I am extraordinarily pleased that this has moved forward. And again, thanks to Chairman Mitz, thanks to Alderman Brendan Riley, and thanks to Rosa Escareno, our Commissioner of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, and her team, who really shepherded this entire package, including this last piece, through committee, city council, workshopping with small businesses and other interested stakeholders. This is how we do it, and I think, folks, we got it right. Finally, I'm proud to share that earlier today in City Council, we introduced an ordinance to help ensure our city becomes a national leader for social equity cannabis businesses. There's been a lot of discussion over the last 2 years about this most important topic. Pending approval, this proposed legislation will help both attract and retain cannabis businesses by giving them easier access to real estate, fewer restrictions, and a clearer pathway towards opening their doors. In addition, this legislation also kicks off a recruitment pitch to social equity cannabis businesses, which are owned by individuals that have either been directly impacted or come from communities that have been suffered under the infamous war on drugs. Equity and inclusion must be at the center of everything that we do here in Chicago, and that includes how our cannabis industry operates. I'm grateful that the state has passed legislation that will open up more opportunities to cannabis operators, particularly those of color. And we want to make sure that in the city of Chicago, we open up our doors and we welcome those businesses into our city. This is what this initiative is intended to do. I know that there will be much discussion and debate, as there should be, but it was important for us to kick off the discussion by putting down a marker and filing an ordinance that starts this important discussion. So I want to thank the many industry leaders and advocates, social equity business owners, and other government officials who are part of our cannabis working group for their input. And we look forward to working even closer with this group to make our shared vision a reality, as well as seeing, of course, passage of the legislation. Taken together, the efforts made by City Council today have put our city on a faster track toward equitable and inclusive socioeconomic growth, which provides the momentum we need in order to fully recover from this pandemic. We have a month off, but we will not be resting. When we come back in September, it's my expectation that we will be filing with the City Council our proposals for the budget for fiscal year 2022, which will also include a framework for how we use and invest the ARP money that we've been so generously rewarded with from the federal government. Much more discussion on that, but I wanted to set the stage for what's to come. Let me just close by saying this is an important historic day in our city. Things that we thought would never happen actually got accomplished today. We came together, we put aside differences, and we worked together on compromises that make a difference in the quality of life in our city. This is what it means for democracy to actually work. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes passions overcome us, but as long as we're moving forward and focused on the reason that we're all here, which is for the betterment of our city and making sure that our residents have what they need to be safe and lead fulfilling lives, that's what we have to be about. And that's very satisfying for me as mayor, and I'm sure I speak for my colleagues, the older people who are here. That's what we must be about. So at this point, I welcome my friend and colleague, Chris Taliaferro, to say a few words. Chris.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, everyone. Mayor, let me thank you so much and your administration for making the tough calls and your leadership. And the leadership of Alderman Osterman, Alderman Sawyer, Alderman Hairston, and Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosas. Carlos, I can never say just Carlos. I'm just Ramirez Rosas. For some reason, it has to be his full name because it helps me put that whole thing together. But the mayor talked about earlier a journey, and that's what this has been. Most folks wanted to put a time frame on this journey, whether it's a year or 2 years. But a journey is sometimes that there is no time frame that you can put to it. You just hope that on your path, on your journey, that you can produce the best results that you possibly can. And I think that's one of the things, and because of the importance of what we had to do as city council members, and how it would affect our police department in our city, we could not easily and haphazardly in this journey any quicker than what it did. And I think we took careful measures to make sure that every aspect and every rock was turned, and every thought went into the ordinance that was produced and voted on and passed today. And I say that this journey isn't over. It's simply, we've only just met one leg of it or two legs of it. But the end process must be a better city of Chicago. The end process must be a better Chicago Police Department. And that's when the journey somewhat ends there. And then it continues on to not only just completing and having a good police department or the best in the country, but keeping it at that level. And so I'm honored to have worked with the men and women on the city council to produce this ordinance. And I thank them for their hard work. And we can't go without thanking the members of the coalition. As I said earlier, the hundreds of Desmond Yanceys and the hundreds of Mr. Chapman, Mr. Frank Chapman, and the hundreds of Adam Grosses that took their time and effort to love upon this city and to love the residents of the city to produce the best ordinance possible. I think in the end, all of us have the same vision, and this is something our mayor has spoken about very eloquently, and that's reshaping the future of this city, reshaping the future of the Chicago Police Department. If we can't all have that goal in our hearts and have that goal in the forefront of our mind, we fail the residents of this city. And that's something that we all refuse to do. We will make sure that this ordinance is just a stepping stone to building a great foundation to the home that we call the city of Chicago. Thank you so much to all of you guys for letting me be a part of the ordinance that we bring before the people of this city. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Harry Osterman, Alderman of the 48th Ward. Today is a historic day in our city, a day that we are going to take a huge step forward to bringing the communities of Chicago and the police closer together. We did not get into where we are when it comes to violence and the distrust and the chasm between some communities and the police overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. But today, passing this ordinance puts Chicago in the forefront nationally, but more importantly, it brings communities around the city to the table with the police in a more constructive way that will lead us to, I really believe, a safer city. For children that are here now as they grow up, for people that are there out in every corner of the city of Chicago. Today you heard a very thoughtful debate where you saw in very clear terms some differences of how people interact with the police. We want to get to a city that every single neighborhood feels the same way, where every single neighborhood can trust to pick up the phone and call the police and work side by side. When we have that trust, when we have that community working side by side with the police, we will have a safer city, and it'll help our city grow. We would not be here without Mayor Lightfoot's leadership. Her longstanding support of these ordinances, but really coming together at this critical time with her staff and bringing people to make it happen was critical. And I want to thank her on behalf of the coalition for her leadership on this issue and getting this over the finish line. Mayor, thank you. I want to thank Chris Taliaferro. Chris is a former police officer, and he brought his dedication and love of Chicago, his experience as an officer, his leadership as an alderman from the west side of the city, to the task of shepherding a very difficult, challenging ordinance through. And trust me when I can tell you that there were many times when this whole thing could have collapsed, but Chris helped us moving forward together. And Chris, I want to thank you for the leadership on this ordinance. You made it happen. There are many aldermen who I really want to thank. Carlos Ramirez Rosa, Leslie Hairston, aldermen like Sophia King, Michelle Smith, Andre Vasquez, Greg Mitchell, many others. Some that even didn't vote for this, their input on this based on what they saw in their community helped make this ordinance a balanced, better ordinance. But the coalition of aldermen that came together really worked side by side and really worked to get this over the finish line. This would not have happened unless it was a team effort. But the team effort was grounded in community. The ordinance is grounded in community. And Desmond Yancey, coalitions from the GAPA Coalition, One North Side, the Carper Coalition, many people that have worked on this for decades, this issue, have really brought us closer together. This would not have happened without them. They are on the ground in communities. They've heard the stories. They're also going to be our partners in making sure our city's safer. Lastly, I want to say two things real quick. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to work with Rod Sawyer. We're kind of different ends of the city, but we've been partners on this for a long time, longer than either one of us care to say. But together we've worked with our colleagues and really got this done. And Rod, it was a pleasure to work with you on this. I hope it takes us a quicker time to pass other ordinances in the future. I want to say one last thing, and the mayor brought up the budget coming forward. This is a first step on safety, but we're not going to have a safe city unless we're investing in the communities that need support. And that's something that we hope to look at the budget on how to rectify some of the past injustices or disinvestment around our city to make our city whole where everyone in our city is supported. So today's a great day for our city. It's a step in the right direction, and I'm proud to be with everyone here today. I want to bring up Carlos Ramirez Rosa.
Chicago has enacted the nation's strongest and most progressive civilian oversight ordinance. Let me say that again, because it's historic. Chicago has enacted the nation's strongest and most progressive civilian oversight ordinance. How did we get here? We got here because decades ago, black leaders fed up with misconduct and police violence and unconstitutional and racist policing in their communities made a demand for community control of the police. We got here because the previous administration decided to cover up the police killing of Laquan McDonald, because 16 shots rang out and people took to the streets to demand justice. We got here because a task force was formed, and under then non-Mayor Lightfoot's leadership, the task force heard the community's demand for civilian oversight and included that recommendation in their final report. In the wake of the news that the murder of Laquan McDonald had been covered up, I joined with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and together with a lot of organizations and about a dozen aldermen, we introduced the Civilian Police Accountability Council Ordinance. And shortly thereafter, Harry and Rod and One North Side and a bunch of groups got together and they formed the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability, and they introduced their own proposal. After a lot of years, we came together because we understood that our city needed to get something done to right the ship on policing. And we compromised, but those compromises were based on a principle that at the heart of transparency, there must be democracy. That democracy is critical to community control of the police, that democracy is critical to restoring trust in our institutions, in our government, and in the services and the departments that are supposed to protect and serve. And after we got together, Mayor Lightfoot came together with us. And I want to thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for working with the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Coalition to get us the ordinance that was enacted today. That coalition that came together, maybe an unlikely coalition, came together for what's good for the city of Chicago. I want to be clear what this ordinance is and what this ordinance is not, because we have to be truthful and we have to be honest. This ordinance is not defunding the police. This ordinance is not abolishing the police. This ordinance is good government, it's good public policy, it's police reform. It's predicated on the belief that if we can bring police and communities together, if we can ensure that young people have a real voice in the policing that's impacting their lives and impacting their community, if we ensure that communities on the south side and the west side can have a real say in the policing that's impacting their communities, that if we can have democracy, if we can have transparency, if we can have inclusivity, that we will be a safer Chicago. The research backs that up. You can go and do it on your own, or you can talk to Adam Gross from BPI. He can tell you the research shows that when we restore trust in policing and when we bring that community voice into police departments, our cities become safer. It was on that basis that coalitions also work with Mayor Lightfoot to pass the Welcoming City Ordinance amendments. So I think we should all be very proud of what our city has accomplished today. As Mayor Lightfoot said, there's so much work left to be done, but this is a great start. This is a firm foundation. And moving forward, we know that we have the wind at our back and that we're moving towards a more just Chicago and a more safe Chicago for everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Roderick Sawyer, and I serve as Alderman of the 6th Ward. This is truly an historic day, a day where we can honestly say that we have come together to form something that will bring citizens and the police closer together towards solving unsolved crimes and making our communities safer. It was a long effort. We did not give up. We had two paths going that way, as Carlos stated, both with CPAC and then with GAPA, and we persevered. We got to a point where we both felt that we can go further together than we could separately. And we connected, had very intense, sometimes contentious conversations at nights, at weekends. We've met scores of times, if I would say so, Adam, and sometimes they were rough. But the end result was, as was stated earlier, the most progressive, the most effective community oversight ordinance in the country. And we're very proud of that. But it's not over. One thing that we will have to have, in addition with crafting the ordinance, is collaboration. We need the police to come forward. We need the community to come forward. When it's time to assemble these district councils, when it's time to form the commissions, we need people to come forward and be present and step up and say enough is enough, and they want to do more for the benefit of the city of Chicago. I just want to thank everyone that was involved in this. Again, I want to thank the GAPA and CARPA groups. We could not have done it without you. My colleagues, Carlos, Ramirez, Rosa. I'm going to get all my full name pronounced one of these days. But Carlos has been a true advocate, a true friend in getting this together. And also my great friend, not just my automatic friend, but my lifelong friend, Leslie Hairston, who started off on the other side, but we were on different sides working together, trying to make this happen. And she knows that I forever appreciate her, and we're glad to be doing this together. And who thought that two automatic legacies would come to get together and really work on police oversight, community control. I really want to thank Harry Osterman. I could not have done this, I could not have been a part of this without his involvement. When we first talked about it, we stated that we needed a North Side alderman that really gets it. And it was immediate who that person was. And it's been a great ride, and I'll forever be grateful for having that experience with Harry, and he's become a true friend and someone that I know I can depend on and work together with in the future. So this is a great ordinance, people, but we have to implement it. Let's get it working. Starting with once we get the interim commission working, let's get people involved. Let's get that spirit of collaboration together, and let's have a more effective police department. Let's have a more effective community commission, and let's get to have a safer Chicago. And I thank you. And at this time, I want to introduce my good friend, the Alderman of the 5th Ward, Leslie Hairston.
Thank you, Alderman Sawyer. You know, there's a saying about Chicago, that Chicago ain't ready for reform. Well, today, Chicago is. And you've seen that in what we have introduced today and what we passed today. I remember when I first introduced the ordinance way back in 2016, and it was just me. And I was just standing there. And it was the right thing to do, and it was the right thing to do at that time. But what I didn't have is I didn't have the coalition. I didn't have all of the people. And that's what we have today. We have something that was put together by all of the people, that includes the people. You know, I am very fortunate to represent a ward that is very active. And I would like to acknowledge the Invisible Institute and all of the Fifth Ward residents and the University of Chicago Law School. And of course, my former employee, Desmond Yancey, who have been working on this for years. And, you know, when you see a problem, you try to find a way to fix it. And you may have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have a support system behind you, it goes nowhere. And so over the years, we have come together. We have come together with Alderman Sawyer and Alderman Osterman, and Alderman, I'm not going to say Ramirez Rosa. I'm going to leave out one name. And we have gotten something that we are actually proud of. Alderman Taliaferro, you have mostly been a good leader. You know, sometimes being the lady of the bunch, you have to kind of get in there and scrap with the guys. And so, you know, you've handled that well. But you have been generous. And so I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your time. And Mayor Lightfoot, thank you for keeping your word. It is more important now than ever that those of us that are in the public eye not just say what we want to say, but actually back it up and make our word worth something. In today's society where we've got real news, fake news, we've got everything. It is important that the people that we serve have our trust, and that they can trust what we say. And when it came down to it, you were there, your team was there, and it wasn't in a room, but we got it done. And I think this is something that can make all of us proud. When we engage the people that we represent, we have a better product, we have a better city, we have a safer city. And when we work together with the police and the community, which I think was the idea behind community policing, but we somewhere along the line didn't get there, and we have to rely. You hear on the news every day, well, you know, such and such happened, there was this incident that happened, but nobody's talking. I talk to my commanders every day. Anytime there's an incident, yeah, they were shot, they're, you know, one step before death, and they are not talking. And everybody in the community is talking. They're talking in the barbershops, they're talking in the nail salons, they're talking in the beauty shops, but they're not talking to the police. And so I think this will help facilitate a better working relationship, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. In December of 2009, my friend Alvin Nash was having a mental health crisis. And in an abundance of caution, his family called 911. Minutes later, the police arrived, and shortly after, on Christmas Eve, Alvin, who was a U.S. Naval veteran and a union organizer, was killed in front of his wife and son. 6 years later, in December of 2015, Quintonio LeGrier was having a mental health crisis, called 911 for help. Minutes later, the police arrived, and shortly after, the day after Christmas, Quintonio and his downstairs neighbor Betty Jones lay dead, killed in a hail of police bullets. But the moment that brought us here was the videotaped murder and subsequent cover-up of Laquan McDonald. This moment put the city on a trajectory that has us here today. Many people were surprised to see this brazen and senseless behavior from the Chicago Police Department, but for many in this city, this was just a reminder of the need for something different, something substantive to prevent something like this from happening again. Something needed to be done so that all the citizens of this city felt safe. So the roots of this ordinance has never been anti-police. It's always been about making sure that all residents of all communities feel safe, building trust and making communities safe for each and every one of us. But conversations about police reform are challenging and the stakes are high. So it's important to keep the conversation rooted as much as possible in some shared principles and some shared understandings. First, when we talk about policing and police reform, we should always keep in the front of our minds that what we really care about is public safety. We want everyone, civilians and police officers, and my father was a police officer for 39 years here in this city. We want them all to go home at night at the end of the day and be safe and at work and in their homes and in their communities. We might feel differently about how we achieve these goals, but it is important to note that we all share these goals and that we need to work together to advance them. Second, if we want to increase public safety, there's nothing more important than building trust. Trust isn't just important because it makes us feel good, it's important because it keeps us safe. There's less crime and violence in communities where there's more trust in the police department. So when we talk about any particular police reform and we talk about increasing public safety, we should always ask whether a particular approach is likely to increase or decrease trust. More than anything else, that's what's missing now. And more than anything else, this is what we need. So today, I am so grateful for the people that made this passage of this ordinance possible. This victory, very much like this ordinance, is deeply rooted in community and is a victory for all of Chicago. But this work is only the beginning. We still have to work together to build the commission and district councils in order to bring the change necessary to make this transformation real, in order to bring real safety to all Chicago residents. So first, I want to thank the coalition, the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Coalition, which came together to do this important and difficult work. If it weren't for the hundreds of thousands of residents that supported this movement and created the moral and political climate to make this ordinance possible, we wouldn't be here. I'm especially grateful for the youth who have flooded the streets since that day in 2015 to make sure that this change would come to this broken system. Next, I'd like to thank our courageous sponsors, my alderperson, Leslie Harrison, I'm gonna say the whole thing, Alderman Roderick Sawyer, Alderman Harry Osterman, and Alderman Carlos Ramirez-Rosa. Thank you all for standing with us in this fight. And Chairman Taliaferro, your leadership on this issue since the beginning has been instrumental. I'd also like to thank Alderpersons Taylor, King, Vasquez, Martin, Irvin, and Haddon for your counsel as we work to craft this ordinance. And lastly, I want to thank Mayor Lightfoot and her administration, who worked tirelessly over the weekend to bring this to fruition. And though our path was not one without difficulty, it is one that has brought us to the conclusion today. So again, I'm thankful and grateful. Thank you.
Before I take questions, let me also add a few more thanks. As has been alluded to, it was a long weekend. It was a long journey, but a particularly long weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Hours and hours of conversations back and forth, caucusing to get this thing done. And on my team, I want to particularly thank Manny Perez, the head of our intergovernmental affairs, whose shuttle diplomacy really was, I think, a big deciding factor in moving this forward. I also want to thank my friend, Maurice Clausen, my former chief of staff. Maurice is somebody I met through the Police Accountability Task Force. As I mentioned earlier, he was the principal architect of the section of the report that dealt with civilian oversight. From his role at MacArthur, he was a huge push to get the groups that became GAPA funded, and then as chief of staff worked tirelessly to get this moving forward. And one of his last acts was to help draft an ordinance that we introduced. So a big thanks to him, and this day would not have been possible without his contributions going back many years. And again, just grateful to everyone who was here, grateful for our city. You know, when we talk about diplomacy, we we talk a lot about confidence building measures and how we can send messages and signals to those that we're trying to reach, that we hear them and that we see them. I think today was a big step forward in doing just that. For the communities that needed to be heard, who demanded a voice and a seat at the table, today is a big step forward. But I also want to say this to the men and women of the Chicago Police Department. We hear you, and we see you, and we respect you. There's been conversations that suggested that they would go, that they wouldn't work hard, that they would feel like they were under siege. Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the toughest time in the history of our country for policing. Make no mistake about it. But every single day, our fearless men and women of the Chicago Police Department are working their tails off. They've taken over 6,300 guns off the streets already this year. They are on pace to set another record in illegal gun recoveries, double what New York or LA combined will do in the course of the year. They're doing this under very difficult circumstances, going into neighborhoods where there isn't a lot of trust. They're not viewed as legitimate, but they still do their job. Our homicide clearance rate, was, many of you know, was shameful in the teens not that long ago. This year, it keeps inching up and over 50%. We're not satisfied. We need to get further. But now we're in the conversation on national standards, whereas before we were a pariah when it came to actually solving homicides. So there's a lot of good work that's being done, and we've got to do it together. This act today isn't about taking over the police department, defunding the police. It's none of that. And you've heard that, I think, from the sponsors. But it is about building that legitimacy and trust so that everyone can move forward and that every community can be safer. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or questions from any members of the folks that are up here.
Wait 1 second. 2 questions. We're starting with Craig.
Mayor, just
We'll go back to you now.
obviously there's this looks really good going forward. How is the civilian oversight can actually manifest itself in making police more accountable? And how do you see that actually playing out? I mean, I know we're talking about building relationships, but how does that play out for greater accountability?
Well, I'll start in, and I'll invite any of the others to follow on. I think that, for me, the most important work is the infrastructure that will be built on the district councils, because you're going to have folks in community that will be engaged with their neighbors, but also with the police, to be able to problem solve, but also throw a flag if there's something that's going wrong in a particular police district or neighborhood that isn't getting resolved to the satisfaction of the community. I think that's critically important. That happens now. It happens through CAPS. It happens through other engagement. But for the first time, we actually have a formal infrastructure to hold everybody accountable, including police and local districts, but also to organize community members. Accountability has to work both ways, and we want people to be engaged with these district councils. And let me also just add, by the way, CAPS is still very much alive in our city. There have been people who have been serving in a role of community volunteers for CAPS for decades. And it's my hope that some of those members who really love and care about their neighborhoods and have been engaged with the police department, that they will apply and run as district council members. So I think there's a lot of good things that are happening in neighborhoods across the city. But why this is so important to me, primarily, is the structure that it sets for and building that infrastructure so the community's views and concerns actually have a specific path to be addressed and hopefully resolved as quickly as possible. I don't know if others want to speak to this issue.
You did well.
Okay. You know, these folks are going to keep me honest, particularly the lawyers.
You mentioned the effort to get guns off the street. Do you have an update on the strike force and when we're going to learn anything new about that, or any update on that?
I hope before the end of the week. Believe me, I've been pushing, I've been asking. I hope we're going to hear something soon.
All right, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm supposed to be live in
All right.
7
Go
minutes,
ahead.
I've just been told. But, Madam Mayor, what about witness protection? What do you say? You can talk about confidence building in the community, but what do you say to the mothers I know you've talked to some of them, who know who killed their son. Like the mother in Austin I talked to whose son was murdered in front of 50 witnesses. She knows who killed him, and the police have not made an arrest. You've promised you're going to do something about witness protection. What's going on?
Well, we'll be making some specific announcements about that. You've heard me say this before, Mike. I think that we have to do more for victims, survivors, and witnesses. We have to do more in terms of protecting them, supporting them, providing trauma-informed services to them in a timely manner, but also making sure that we have an environment where witnesses who fear for their own safety have a safe way to report it. And you know that I've met the woman that you're referencing over on the west side. I think it's actually West Garfield Park, to be precise. We had a long conversation when I was out there in the community not that long ago. But you know this as well. One, it is challenging to get people to come forward when they don't feel safe and they don't feel trust. So another important part of this ordinance today is really hopefully sending that message of trust, but we've got to do more to make sure that it's actually manifests in those communities. But also, I will tell you, given the work that's been done by our detective division over the course of this year, the number of homicides that they've solved, they set a record last year. They're on pace to set a record this year. They're using a combination of technology, old-fashioned street lever, going out there and working communities. We still got a lot to do regarding making sure that our detective division is much more diverse. That's going to, I think, help build trust, and we've got a plan for that. But we're getting there because the community is coming forward.
But what do you say to the witnesses who say, I can't go talk, I'm not going to testify in court because they'll kill me or they'll kill my kids?
Well, so a couple of things on that, and I'm going to put on my former prosecutor's hat. We understand that. We're not asking people to risk life and limb, but two things there. Number one, you can report things anonymously. Now, that means we have to build a case and really corroborate what we're hearing anonymously, but the anonymous tip line has been available for years now, and we encourage people to do that. But I also feel very strongly, and I'm going to channel Father Flager here. Given the challenges that we're facing and the chaos and havoc that is happening in too many neighborhoods because people are settling petty disputes with guns, because of the proliferation of guns in our streets, sometimes you have to step out on faith. And you have to let your faith overcome your fears. I know that's not going to happen in every instance, but we don't solve crimes. We don't make communities safer and better if people who know what's happening in the community stay silent. And Alderman Harrison's right. What's happening in many instances is not a mystery. The people who are perpetrating these crimes are not unknown. But we've got to build confidence and faith in communities, one, so that they say something before the shooting even happens, but if it happens, that they come forward not only to solve that crime, but to prevent the retaliation. Retaliatory shooting is a huge part of the challenge that we face in public safety in the city. We have made a lot of steps forward in that regard, and I credit the folks that are 700 plus strong across the city that are part of street outreach and street intervention, and hopefully more to come in the 2022 budget. But this is all about building trust. The speed at which we move, the speed at which we are able to move forward and make significant lasting gains is the speed of trust. And we've got to accelerate that by building measures like this.
All right, Tamara.
Mayor, go back to the long weekend, because there's one way to, I just wonder what got this across the finish line, because there's one way to read this, and that is where this landed is pretty much where you want it. The grassroots long fought for the power to hire and fire the superintendent, the power to make policy. They'll have say in those matters, but ultimately the council can veto. Ultimately, you have the final say. So how did we get here? What happened over the weekend to make this a done deal?
Well, look, I can only speak for myself, and I'll invite others who care to speak. We all, I think, wanted something to happen. We all were very conscious of the moment that we were in, and that our neighbors all across the city were demanding change and demanding a larger say in the operations of the police department and how decisions were made and really how neighborhoods were policed. So I don't think there was any dispute about that, but some of these finer points, we had to take time to really figure out how we could strike the right balance. And, you know, sometimes things come together in a good way at a time which is unexpected, but I think we all recognize a sense of urgency to get something done and not have another month, another few months, another year go by. I know I felt that sense of urgency and responsibility. I believe that my colleagues who are here and others felt the same way, and so the moment was right. I don't know if it was anything more than that, but the moment was right, the commitment was there, and we really bore down. Hours and hours and hours were spent over the course of this weekend. I think I was on the phone most of the day, Saturday, Sunday, certainly a big chunk of time Thursday and Friday as well. But the moment presented itself, and I think all of us felt like we cannot let this moment pass and not get something done.
Can I interject
Please.
a little bit? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Your Honor. Taman, to your point, and the Mayor stated it absolutely correctly, but specifically to your point as it relates to certain aspects of the ordinance, let's be clear, the Commission has final say in ordinances, the policy decisions that come before them. The Mayor, in her right, the Mayor can reject them. And this is why I say that it's important and it's incumbent upon the community to get involved in this. If the community felt strongly enough to say that the mayor's decision was not correct, their obligation is to come to us as aldermen to say, we support what the commission stated, we need you to override that rejection. And if they come to us in sufficient numbers and do the job that we're expecting them to do, then we have that final say. That means the community has the final say. So I just wanted to correct that slightly. You know, we took a long time getting to this process. A lot of this process is community dependent, it's community driven. So if they feel strongly enough about whatever particular policy that is and come to us collectively, we have that power to say that our community has spoken and spoken to enough of us that we can overturn that policy.
All right, Justin.
Thank you.
And if I may, just let me add at this point. You know, the focus, unfortunately, has been on the conflict. And I guess I get that. But what I would say is this. I think all of us are hopeful that this commission will work in concert, not in compromise, but in concert with the police department to hold them accountable, to be sure. But if you see a bunch of stuff getting elevated to the mayor's level or to city council, that's a loss for everyone. It should be that there are negotiations and compromise and collaboration between the commission and the police department. If that happens, that's a win for everyone. And that's what I think we all should be focused on and encouraging, not the conflict. If there's a conflict and it has to come to me, it shouldn't, in my view. But if it does, obviously, I'm going to call balls and strikes. And if there's a desire for the matter to go further to the city council, we've created a mechanism for that. But that should be extraordinarily rare, in my view. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mayor, and hopefully an alderman can weigh in. So there's going to be an interim commission before those local district councils can be elected. What will that interim commission look like? My understanding is the city council will nominate nominees for you to select through the rules committee. Will the city council nominate someone and take a full vote on it? Will they interview candidates? And for you, Mayor, what are you looking for in nominees for that interim commission?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there was a desire to get started. and not have to wait till the election cycle with electing the district councils. And I think that that's the right thing. Let's keep moving forward. So I supported that part of it. Look, I want people of goodwill who care about their city. I hope what we're going to see is a number of people that raise their hand and say they want to participate. I hope that we're going to see people with a track record of being engaged in the community and really having a community heart. There was a lot of conversation about lived experience, but I want to see people who come with a diverse array of lived experience from the various districts and communities that are going to be served by this commission. So having a balanced and representative group of DAC folks, but also commissioners for both for the interim, but also for the permanent commission, I think is what the objective that we're all hoping we will see.
All right, Aaron.
Hi. For Alderman Hairston, please. Hey.
So Hyde Park Hill.
I know. I knew it. That's why I gave the smile. You all should also have neighborhood newspapers.
Yeah, you all should. I'm curious about what you think of the proposal, not the proposal now, it's passed for the district councils, and what powers you would like for the commission to delegate to them specifically. It's not named, as far as I can tell, in the white paper.
And I think that's done on purpose, because you want them to have the ability and the capacity to say what they need or what they feel that they need. I have a lot of confidence in the public, and again, the communities that I represent, we've got people from all walks of life that bring lots of information and talent to be it a regular meeting, be it a commission, and so I think that we have to allow them, as they create this, to say this is what we need and this is what we don't need.
Yeah, but I mean, what kind of powers specifically do you think would be necessary here? How much power do you think would be necessary here in an ideal world?
I can't tell you. Okay. I can't tell you because they haven't been named yet. And, again, this is a starting point. It is really about collaboration. Mm-hmm. And so until they ask a question and get a response, be it favorable or unfavorable, then they might have some idea of what additionally they would need in terms of power.
Okay, and then one for the mayor, if I could. Mm-hmm. I just wondered if you could address at all about going after what happened last summer with all of the social movements and that kind of thing, all of the protests, biggest protests in 50 years and that kind of thing, addressing what happened with the protests related to, the stuff that's happened right now. Was it at all kind of a response to the protests that occurred? How do you view this as a kind of relation to the action in the streets or, demands of people and that kind of thing, the action, the vote today and that kind of stuff? So
you're asking me whether or not what happened last summer influenced the process that led us to this moment of passage?
That it did. How specifically did it?
Look, I think Mr. Yancey and others and Alderman Ramirez Rosa really said it very eloquently. We have a long history in the city of the relationship between the police and communities, and really goes back decades and decades. I date my history of this, not personally, but my knowledge of it, to really 1974, when Congressman Metcalf demanded reform of the way in which the police department responded to communities of color. And as a result of that, the first Mayor Daley, Richard J., formed something called the Office of Professional Standards, housed within the Chicago Police Department. A million years later, I led that, OPS. But there have been flashpoints throughout our history, way even before 1974, where communities of color, and particularly black folks, have felt and highlighted instances in which individuals or neighborhoods or groups have been abused by the police department and felt like the police department had unchecked power and that nobody was responding. In 1974, when OPS was formed, there was no mechanism for residents to lodge a complaint against the police. There wasn't. There was no even thought that if a community member felt abused, that the police department or somebody would even investigate. So when you look at the arc of that history, all of those things, and certainly more recently, the murder of Laquan McDonald, the suppression of the video, the activism around that grew out of that, the Police Accountability Task Force, and many other markers along the way. Mr. Yancey talked about Quintonio Greer and Betty Jones. During that time, I was sitting as the president of the Chicago Police Board and heard meeting after meeting after meeting, people coming, expressing their anger, but also their trauma of their experience of policing in their neighborhoods. Rarely did we see folks from the north side or other parts of the city that are viewed as quote unquote safe come and talk about their experience with the police. So there have been so many things in my mind that have led to this moment and have really shaped people's opinions and perceptions all over the city about legitimacy of the police, what we as a public can expect and demand for our tax dollars that go into the police department. I can't pick one incident out of it, out of so many over decades, but there have been many, and there's been a persistent movement forward to say, this isn't working, we need something different. This is not working, we need something different. And today, now we have another strategy to hopefully bring community in a lasting way, build an infrastructure that can create trust in neighborhoods all across our city. But it's going to be up to us to give life to this new process, because on paper it won't mean anything. In practice is where the rubber is going to hit the road, and we all are committed to making sure that we see this through, that a commission and an infrastructure and community rises from this blueprint, and that we create a lasting set of changes that build the trust, because trust is absolutely critical to safety. The two go hand in hand.
And hello, Mayor. What needs to happen, or what must happen on the government side to gain the trust and the cooperation of police officers in this process, especially when their own leadership and, frankly, some members of the city council are predicting the worst?
Yeah, look, I heard those comments. I hear those comments. I don't share those comments. We all have a responsibility for public safety. And as far as I'm concerned, as the mayor of the city, buck stops with me. And I've said this before, and I believe to be true. All the other great things that are happening in our city, the feeling of coming out of COVID, the progress that we're making, the fact that our economy is really coming back strong, and good news that our revenues are coming in stronger than predicted, none of that matters if people do not feel safe. None of it matters. And we know that to be true. Our police officers are working their tails off, and they're going to continue to do so. I said this before, 6,300 guns taken off the street. You don't do that if you're sitting back. Solving crimes and making arrests at very high rates. You don't do that if you aren't working. Is there more to be done? Yes. Striking that right balance is really true. And I think that we, as I said on the floor of City Council, you got to stop demonizing the police. Yes, of course, and this isn't, I don't want to be misconstrued as saying, well, there's just a few bad apples. No, there are systems in place that set our police up for failure. There are systems in place where they haven't been historically taught things about trust and community relationships, and that, in my view, their most powerful tool is extending a hand in friendship to help people who are in need. If you have that trust of the community, there's nothing that you can't accomplish. That goes for me as mayor, goes for all the elected officials that are here, but it also goes for the police. That trust is absolutely essential. And as I said before, that confidence building measures are really important. This is why, for example, the superintendent a year ago requires every single front-facing police officer to engage in community service work every week. Every week. Not just the beat officers, but also the TAC officers, the community safety team. All of those officers have to get out there and do the work. Why? Because if you are present and doing the work, people will trust you. But if they just see you as a badge and a gun, you're never going to break through. So I know that there is rhetoric out there that this is going to open up all kinds of problems for the city. We're going to see crime. I think somebody said today, and I think hopefully they were being hyperbolic, it's going to triple. I don't think any of that's true, because this has been coming for a long time. It's not like this is some secret that we sprung on folks today. And yet, despite those saber-rattling fears, what we're seeing is year over year, month over month, our homicides and shootings are going down. And what we're seeing is our officers are working their tail off. They are tired, and the young ones, I can't believe that they're not afraid. People are shooting at the police in alarmingly high numbers. Not undercover officers, but marked squads, people in uniform, unmistakably the police. We're asking them to go into areas and situations that are extraordinarily dangerous. And guess what? They're doing it. They're doing it, all in the service of our residents. So I do not have fears that they are going to shut down and not do their job. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mayor Mariah Wolfel from WBEZ. Once the commission is formed and logistics are worked out, what's a specific policy, police policy, that you want to see them either reform or start to craft, specifically the first one that you want to see?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not sure that I have an answer. For me, as I said earlier, the most important thing is building that infrastructure so that the community feels that they have say and sway over what's happening on local policing decisions. More transparency, more dialogue, more accountability. I personally think that's one of the most important things that this new body can do, creating that infrastructure in every police district so that residents feel like they can be heard. It's happening now through CAPS. It's happening now through community engagement outreach efforts. But building a permanent infrastructure for that, I think, is going to be critically important.
Okay, thank you. Today, Alderman Wagaspak introduced an ordinance that calls for the Chicago City Inspector General to join the Park District in its investigation of widespread sexual misconduct and abuse of girls at the Park District beaches and pools. Mm-hmm. Do you agree that the city inspector should join in this investigation to help the under-resourced Park District Inspector General?
Well, I would take issue with a couple pieces of that. I have spoken with Chairman Wagaspak about this issue, and we've agreed to work together, and I've given him some suggestions on it. I don't think that the Park District Inspector General is under-resourced. That's not where the issue is. The issue is we have to take complaints of sexual assault, sexual harassment very, very seriously. And I know that the Park District does, but I'd like to see and make sure, particularly some of the ones that to me look like criminal conduct, that there's a rigorous investigation by law enforcement. We cannot have our young people who their parents entrust to work in Park District programs feeling anything other than 1,000% safe.
So do you think that the city inspector general should join?
I don't think that that's necessary. I don't think that's where the challenge lies.
All right, Alex.
Hi, Mayor. So shifting gears, I want to ask about the cannabis ordinance that you introduced. Two components of it specifically. First, why are you confident that getting rid of those 7 districts will not lead to clustering of dispensaries? And second, this might be a little in the weeds, but allowing them to open in B3 and C1 zones, why take away that lever for aldermen to be able to use zoning to control where they can open?
Well, look, I think the most important thing that we did today is really start a conversation about the next phase of cannabis expansion. I am optimistic, given the changes in the legislation at the state level, that we're going to see people who are truly from underrepresented communities get a seat at the table. We really haven't seen that with the initial state legislation that allowed medical providers to turn into cannabis dispensaries. That was and I get why that happened, but what that did was make sure that the folks that were already in the game, the overwhelming majority of them who were white and male, that they had a big head start. Nobody anticipated that it would be multiple years head start, but now they have. So what I want to make sure is that as this process evolves, that true social equity candidates, not I hired a bunch of janitors and now I'm calling myself social equity, but true people of color, women, people from disadvantaged communities actually get an opportunity at some of the potentially more lucrative spots. So it's the start of a discussion, not an end, but I think that there are things that we can do to really open up opportunities and invite more cannabis businesses into the city of Chicago.
And then real quick on ward superintendents, I wonder if you got a chance to look at Alderman Hopkins' proposal to actually write policymaking into their job descriptions. Do you think that's a good approach to keeping them Shackman exempt?
I haven't had an opportunity to explore that. I certainly understand what Alderman Hopkins was trying to achieve. If you listen to the discussion on the floor regarding the resolution in support of former Commissioner Tully and his retirement, one of the themes that ran through those comments over and over again is streets and sand, and the work that's done in the neighborhoods can make or break an alderman. And I think people believe that that's true. A basic core function of an aldermanic office is keeping the streets clean, keeping the alleys clear, filling potholes and things of that nature. So the ward superintendent plays a critically important role. My own personal view is that it should be a person that the alderman selects and that the alderman has a huge hand in holding accountable to get things done on behalf of his or her ward. So I think that there are things that we can do to be responsive to the comments raised by the Inspector General. And, you know, like everything, we've got to figure out the best way to do it. And I'm confident that we'll be able to manage that. And again, hats off to Alderman Hopkins for starting, I think, an important conversation, and we'll work through that together as we work through other ordinances.
Hello. With new legislation introduced today, though I believe it was sent to rules on sports wagering, do you support allowing teams to offer sports books, and would that potentially hurt revenue to a future Chicago casino?
Well, first of all, sportsbook is the law of our state. That got passed by the General Assembly in 2019. So I support that law. No, I do not believe that it will undercut our efforts on a future casino, and we're going to work hard to make sure that it doesn't. Obviously, there were some interesting things afoot today, which I'm sure you all will ferret out. I don't need to give you any leads on that, but we've got to make sure that everything is above board and that there's a level playing field, and we're going to work to make sure that we do that.
All right, Bill has the last questions.
Mayor, on the sign and sidewalk permits, there's two pieces to that issue. There is the speeding it up for businesses, which was accomplished today, and then there's aldermanic privilege, which the original proposal removed control for aldermen. They emerged today pretty much with control intact. So is this an acknowledgement that removing aldermanic privilege from council members just isn't achievable despite your best pledges during the campaign?
No, and I would actually disagree slightly with your characterization. I think that what we had proposed was not eliminating aldermanic involvement. It was changing the form and the timing of it. As you heard early on in the committee testimony and certainly on the floor, it takes months and months and months, and in some instances years, to just get a simple sign. And that shouldn't happen. Particularly coming out of the economic meltdown occasioned by COVID-19, what we have to be about is empowering small businesses and giving them every opportunity to be set up for success. And we heard this over and over again. The signs are a problem. I think that we fix that with the passage of this ordinance today. Aldermen were never cut out under our proposal, but the timing and the role certainly was changed. And I think there was a recognition on the part of Alderman Riley, who understood the necessity of compromise, that we had to speed things up. And my hope is that he's right, that 95% of the time the alderman will weigh in, BACP will weigh in, and then it will move forward without having to go to City Council for an ordinance for every single sign. If you take a look, for example, at the committee that handles signage, every month, literally a ream of paper on signs.
Yeah, mostly renewals.
And mostly with no one caring about,
right.
No one talking about. So the fact of the matter is, we reflected, I think, the reality. This is obviously aldermen should have a say in what goes on in their ward. That's never been any dispute. But let's make it so that it's not onerous on businesses and preventing them from actually being able to open. That's ultimately what we were hoping to accomplish, and I think we've done that now.
Well, during the campaign, you were quite clear that aldermen shouldn't have a say on everything that goes on in their wards, because it's been used to, and we have a laundry list of corrupt issues where, you know, we could point to Burke's indictment and others, right, that became an issue during the campaign. So I'm just trying to get at the issue of the control, not whether it's speedy for business or not. And I'm just wondering, just generally, are you still committed to trying to curtail aldermanic privilege?
So what I said during the campaign, and what I believe now, is unchecked unilateral veto right is not democratic, period. And in the extreme, that's what I have been fighting against. I think that's what many people fought against, and that many people that are sitting as aldermen today, that's what they campaigned against. So it's not have no say, right? Aldermen who do their job well, and I think every single one of these people qualifies, they know exactly what's going on in their community. They're the heartbeat of their community. They know better than anybody else, certainly better than me as a mayor, because I've got a vision of the whole city, but not down to the block level that aldermen do. Of course, aldermen have to have a role. The question is, how does that role manifest itself? And what we had before, and what we're still trying to make progress on, is unchecked, unilateral, I say, and that's it. That is a breeding ground for corruption, right? You know, take a look at the Burke indictment. It's written all over it. That is aldermanic prerogative on steroid, as alleged by the federal government. And again, he's entitled to a presumption of innocence in his day in court. But the corruption cannot be ignored. And that's, I think, what people are sick and tired of. But also, you know, even stepping back from corruption, having 50 different sets of rules is impossible. It's impossible. And we've heard from way too many business people who said, you know what, I'm going to the suburbs. It's simpler there. I'm not even going to try to do business in the city of Chicago. Who does that hurt? All of us. Mm-hmm. Our taxpayers, our neighborhoods, our tax base. So we've got to strike the right balance, and I really do believe that the substitute ordinance that was passed by City Council today on signs strikes exactly that right balance. It gives aldermen a say in what's happening in their ward, as it should, but it also eliminates layers of red tape. We have so many important things that we have to tackle as a mayor, as a legislative body. Whether or not somebody has a font size of 12 versus 16, I don't really think that qualifies. And I know that they don't want to waste their time on such things. So we've, I think, struck the right blow and the right balance for our businesses to be able to move forward and say, I'm open for business.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.